I'm Jeff. As usual, I'll be discussing all things video game that happened this week, or at least all the things that caught my attention this week. So we have a lot to talk about, including Redfall's, or I guess the failure that is Redfall, Phil Spencer's subsequent interview on the Kinda Funny XCast, as well as the closing of Sony first-party studio Pixel Opus, and Fortnite is heading to the Olympics. Yeah, those Olympics, the Olympics. But let's get into it. All right, so to kick things off, before we get into the bigger news stories this month or this week, I wanted to touch on Atari picking up making another acquisition. I find this really interesting. All the moves Atari keeps making. Obviously, I've said before, this is not the same Atari that we've seen, in the past that everyone knows from the arcade days and the original Atari consoles. A company out of Europe purchased Atari and has been sort of trying to revive it, not just in with reimaginings of their classic games, but also with merchandise and just all the kind of iconic logos and symbols and merch when you consider all the IPs that Atari has, right? But they just picked up a few more. They actually picked up the Atari 2600 catalog through the M Network, which had been a division of Mattel that was making games. So this collection includes things like Armor Ambush, Astro Blast, Frogs and Flies, Space Attack, Star Strike. Just kind of these old classic titles, and Atari is kind of on the warpath of making a comeback as far as filling the sort of retro nostalgia niche. Really interested to see what sort of new titles they start putting out, and if they start to reimagine any of their titles beyond the Recharged series they've currently been doing on PC and console. But yeah, just remains something that's consistently interesting to me is the moves Atari keeps making. They're growing in the corner. I also wanted to touch on Bobby Kotick, or Kotick, however you say it, head of Activision currently. He spoke on... he spoke somewhere. I believe it was... let me just cut over here real fast. So this is off the New York Post is where I saw this, just off Google. But it looks like he kind of made some interesting comments here, talking about the CMA's blocking of the ABK deal. And he sort of framed it as the greatest threat to Western innovation is government regulation, primarily from the UK and the United States. Obviously, those are the two countries currently opposed to the deal. In the US, it's a different story because the government here doesn't block deals so much as they sue to stop, but it'll have to go through a court filing and all that. But in the UK, it's very different. The regulators over there, the CMA, Competition Markets Authority, they do just block, and they have blocked. And so you're seeing Microsoft and Activision kind of come out swinging and really push as they prepare for an appeal. My understanding is that appeals are pretty tough to win over there. You don't take it before a court like you would in the EU or here in the US. You actually appeal to a tribunal that if they decide something is wrong, they kick it back to the CMA to reconsider. So they'll have to win not on the idea that the ruling was wrong, but that there was some irrationality in the decision in a legal sense, right? Not that the CMA is crazy, but that the way they arrived at their decision legally was irrational, right? They didn't use the math or the numbers or the facts laid bare correctly. They could also appeal it on the grounds of illegality or procedural things, but I don't think they're gonna do something as bold as say the CMA acted illegally. They would need some pretty serious proof for that. So just seeing him kind of out making these claims, I thought it was interesting though how he's now framing it even more strongly than before as an issue with for the whole West. And it is something I kind of agree with in the fact that I think as tech companies grow, we're seeing them grow around the world. And I do think for some of these, I guess you'd call them, for some of these plans to roll out, for some of these things to make sense, you're going to need to see larger companies, right? Especially when you look at something like, say, cloud. Cloud is not going to be provided by a real small company, right? You need access to servers, you need that kind of capacity. While it makes sense that it's going to be bigger groups like Microsoft, I think you also see companies like NVIDIA, big in their own right, able to get into that space. But I think it's so small right now, you do need to allow these companies in, because other side of the world, they're not worrying about these companies being too big. All right. And they have open access to all markets, whereas a lot of the markets like in China are closed to these Western companies. So I do think that is going to show an imbalance over time, if not considered. So that's just, that's something to kind of touch on. And then also wanted to touch on Pixel Opus shutting down. That's a first-party studio from Sony PlayStation. Pixel Opus made Concrete Genie, a smaller title that was critically very well received. Obviously not a huge heavy hitter in like the lines with like The Last of Us or God of War or something like that, but still like a critical darling. Smaller team, I believe it was 12 to 15 full time. I could be wrong there, but they posted this on Twitter. Dear friends, our Pixel Opus adventure has come to an end. As we look to new futures, we wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to the millions of passionate players who have supported us and our mission to make beautiful, imaginative games with heart. We are so grateful. I saw a lot of people commenting on this. Sean Layden, former head of SIE, retweeted this with his condolences and spoke about how he really thought well of this team and watching them sort of level up during his tenure there. This really is a shame, I think. Kind of surprising with a studio this small to see PlayStation shutter it. You have to wonder what was going on over there. Was there just not a game plan for the future that they could come up with as far as games they wanted to make? Because Concrete Genie was a real darling of a game. Like I said, with critics, I personally never played it, but it had always been kind of on the backlog, something I was eyeing. Looked great. Surprised they would get rid of a studio that way, not repurpose the studio for other needs. So you have to wonder if there was something institutional at that studio that just didn't jive with the future PlayStation's going for. Because you'd think they'd want to take a studio like that and just build it out or repurpose it for what they have coming forward. Obviously, Sony has a lot of ambitions in like live service titles coming forward. I could see maybe that not gelling with the team at Pixel Opus, or just not being something the studio could ramp up to. Either way, a real shame. I wish all the devs over there, best of luck in finding future work, and hopefully that's not the last we hear of a very talented team from the looks of it. And one other thing I thought was surprising about this, let me just jump over here to, I saw this guy had tweeted, senior game designer at Pixel Opus, and he mentioned, let's see if I can find this tweet. Oh yeah, I was only at Pixel Opus since January, but it has been some of the most creatively fulfilling work of my career. I thought that was surprising that he'd gotten hired in January. The studio shut down like 5 months later, basically. And I went looking, and I saw that, as early as January 26, 2023, here on Showbiz Jobs, PlayStation is running a job ad for a senior level designer for Pixel Opus, which I thought was, so, something changed. Obviously, companies aren't going to tell the whole staff or their hiring manager that, hey, we're considering shuttering the place. But I just thought it was kind of surprising that it makes you wonder what happened over there for that to shut down as it did. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Oh, look, you guys are getting a little sneak peek at what's coming, but you knew it from the thumbnail what we were going to be talking about. But before we kind of get into the rest of the news, I do want to kind of touch on what I've been playing this week. I did finally finish Dredge. I think I took longer than anybody else. I just really enjoyed slowly sailing around and doing the fishing. I would just pop on a podcast sometimes and just spend a whole session fishing and not really progressing the story. Cool game, honestly, fantastic. First, coming from a small team, kind of indie studio, it hooked me in a way that was unique, right? A lot of times I'll start indie games or smaller titles, get a few hours in and be like, okay, cool, I've kind of had my fill. that was a neat gimmick or idea, but I'm not gonna sit here and go for 8-10 hours or whatever it was. But Dredge sunk its teeth into me, or I guess got its hook into me would be a better way to talk about a fishing horror game. But it was fantastic. The art style was incredible, but really I think the gameplay loop was in a lot of ways unique. Not that it was something that had never been seen before, right? You've seen fishing games, you've seen sort of kind of creepy Lovecraftian games, like the one. I will never point correctly at the video, like the Lovecraftian game you see playing right here. But Dredge just did it in a really unique way, and it was fantastic. Start to finish, I recommend it. $24.99. It's a great price for that game too. Pardon me, something in my throat. A lot of times you'll see some of these games come out that are indies that are priced around $40, which I think might have been a fair price for Dredge, but honestly not for a lot of these other indie games. But I think Dredge was aggressively priced at $24.99. I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing it top a lot of charts. I think it's a really fair price for what you're getting. It's an awesome experience. Highly recommend that. Moving on, also been playing The Division 2, same as last week, kind of going through the bounties. Really just using it as like kind of my like warm-up game. Like I've been hopping in, running a couple of the kind of like the like either the control points or the bounties or just the side missions needed to kind of do the manhunt. It's funny, I did spend the second day I got back into D2. D2, everyone's gonna think Destiny 2, but The Division 2. I ended up spending like 45 minutes just cleaning out my stash and organizing the inventory and trying to figure out what gear was worth it and see if should I put together a new build. And yeah, that game has its hooks in me. I'm kind of sucked back in, excited to see what they do in June, which is insane that The Division has caught my interest and pulling me back in right before like Zelda drops and then Final Fantasy, and I have too much to do. Massive. But you got me. I'll be playing The Division. Very excited for that. Also, as I already alluded to over here on the screen, we've got the last... Oh, did you see that? Pointed right at it. The Last Case of Benedict Fox. This came to Game Pass for Xbox and PC Game Pass. I was really excited for this game. If you've watched any of these videos before, I'd been sort of talking this game up as something to watch out for. I love the art style. It reminded me when I first saw like trailers and stuff, it reminded me of Ori and the Blind Forest with the color palette, and obviously it's a 2D Metroidvania with sort of a very modern sort of kind of art direction to it. And it does deliver on that. It is a beautiful game. The platforming itself, though, I don't think it's quite at the Ori level for a couple of reasons. Number one, the most glaring thing with this game, when I play a 2D game personally, I like to be on the D-pad. This game, the controls are designed around the thumbstick. So the left analog stick for controlling movement on a 2D side scroller, like a platformer, it doesn't feel great to me. I really think the D-pad is just a better input for that. I would have liked to have the choice, but the way the controls are set up in this is the D-pad is used for selecting a lot of things. So that's not an option. You're kind of stuck using the left analog stick, and it does make me feel like certain jumps aren't as clean or precise as they could be. The other thing is that, yeah, it's a little bit janky, a little bit clunky. The combat looks like it should be like really precise and tactical and clean, and it's just not quite there. I want like the snappiness of something like maybe like a Dead Cells, and it's just the input's a little slow, a little jank. I saw a lot of people talking about performance issues. I don't want to say I didn't have any, but I didn't notice any, right? And obviously I wasn't testing for them. I wasn't really watching my frames. I was playing this on console. But yeah, I wasn't noticing that unless I'm confusing some of my gripes with the input for performance issues. But we'll see. I've heard it's a short game. I've probably put about 3 hours into it or so. Want to go back and knock it out. Probably need to like focus down on it. Like most Metroidvanias, if I take too long of a break, I'm going to be totally lost when I come back to the map. But I don't know. I don't want to say I'm disappointed, but it didn't quite grab me the way I thought it was going to. So we'll see. I probably will get back around to it. if I can kind of knock it out before Tears of the Kingdom drops on Friday, because once that drops, like, good luck everybody else. I'll be playing Zelda. Last 2 games, because like I'm kind of squirrel brained with games. I'm playing a lot each week. TMNT Splintered Fate. This is an Apple Arcade title that just recently dropped. Caught my eye. Got a little nostalgia for the old Teenage Turtles, and yeah, awesome little game. If you have Apple Arcade, I recommend checking it out. It's essentially a roguelite. You can do it co-op or solo. It reminds me a lot of Ninja Turtles Hades. If you've played Supergiant's game Hades, it's very similar to that. You're doing these runs through levels. You are grabbing different, instead of having different weapons you choose at the start, you choose a different Ninja Turtle. So that gives you the different skill sets. Each one has sort of a different play style, but you have like the dash, the special attack, your normal and your heavy. And yeah, it does respond to controller. I've been playing it with the backbone. Wanted to just grab like a 15-minute kind of burst with it. Ended up like spending like 45 minutes on this game. Something I'm going to go back and probably get some mileage on. Pretty cool title. So yeah, if you have Apple Arcade, I definitely recommend checking out TMNT Splintered Fate. And then also, I've gone back to kind of the final game I've been playing this week, aside from the usual suspects like Rocket League, is Ghost of Tsushima on PS5. I had never finished it. I think I put about 25 hours in, and for whatever reason, sort of faded off it. I'd enjoyed the game at the time. I think I just, like I said, if you know me or watch this channel, I get distracted, especially at around the 20-hour mark in a game. A new shiny can come along and grab me unless that game just really has me. And I jumped back in on a whim, and this game grabbed me immediately, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I didn't finish this game. And it's just like with Spider-Man, where I fell off it only to come back and realize like I was right at a really good part. Like, well, Spider-Man was worse because I dropped Spider-Man, came back to finish it, and realized I stopped with like 2 missions left. Like, I did a mission and then I fought the final boss of the game. But this is not that. I was in the second part of I was in like Act 2, second part. There's like three acts, I believe. Well, there's 3 portions to the island. I was in like the second one. Didn't realize it was like right before like a major battle. So I jumped in, warmed up a little bit, had to go remember all the stances. Ghost of Tsushima has a surprisingly complex and deep combat system. But once I picked it back up with a few random encounters, I went and did this huge battle and got my sea legs back under me. So I'm going to try and power through that one as well. Pretty stupid of me, honestly. Like, I've got a week before Tears of the Kingdom, like I said, and I'm just picking up all these games. But loving it, really loving it. But yeah, that's what we've been playing. That's what we've been playing this week. Like the royal we. That's what I've been playing this week. But let's jump back into some news stories. Just get through some smaller stuff before we head over to the big story over at Xbox. But let's check out real fast. Let me get over to. I mentioned playing TMNT Splinter Fate on Apple Arcade. Just wanted to touch on the fact they added 20 more games, including an exclusive TMNT co-op title. They did grab some indie classics like Limbo and Getting Over It came to the service. Not going to list all the titles, but like, previously they'd had like What the Golf. Now they have What the Car from that same team. But yeah, I just wanted to point this out because I don't know if anyone checks out Apple Arcade. I might be the only like hardcore PC console gamer that also loves Apple Arcade. I feel like that sometimes. I don't really know a lot of people who use it, but for me, it's been a really great little service. Here, let's pull up a little bit of. Check out this footage, man. This is that TMNT Splintered Fate. It has been quite fun playing this. But man, for me, a lot of people go crazy for these like handhelds, and I do think the Asus ROG Ally looks good. Steam Deck's obviously been pretty popular with people. But I find for me, mobile gaming, especially through the Apple Arcade, when I don't feel like I'm playing these sort of predatory, like I'm not playing Candy Crush, I'm not playing gacha games. The curated sort of no charge, like actually like dedicated games that you get from Apple Arcade, and even like the Netflix games has been really refreshing. And usually when I'm on the go, and if I have time to game, I have 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So these experiences that are built around that, that utilize touch controls or the backbone are like perfect, right? Because I rarely find myself in a situation out of my house where I'm like, oh, I have an hour to just game. I'm just going to sit here and pull out like a Steam Deck or something, or even my Nintendo. But I find myself all the time having 5 minutes, 10 minutes to kill and being able to do it that way, which is a pretty cool little side effect. Not side effect, a pretty cool use I found for things like Apple Arcade, and at $4.99 a month. It's kind of a no-brainer for me, especially when they get they get titles like Fantasian from Mistwalker. Platinum Games did a exclusive for them that was sort of like a hack and slash with like a creature collecting mechanic with this really cool watercolor art style. You see a lot of interesting titles like Gris that normally are on console that end up in arcade that are like perfect. Dead Cells recently came to Apple Arcade, which is one of my favorite side scrollers. So yeah, I get a lot of mileage out of that. So I was excited to see them adding this. I'm also very interested and excited to see like Netflix starting to get more and more into serious mobile. I've been playing some games like Into the Breach off Netflix mobile. But they're saying 40 more titles this year. It hasn't happened yet. The Apple Arcade one already happened, but this is coming. I mean, they're looking at things like they have 55 titles now currently. Valiant Hearts had come, which was another kind of popular console title out of like Ubisoft's publishing arm. High Water was one that had happened. They recently added Terra Nil when that launched, but they've got more coming. This one looks pretty interesting here. Rogue Palace. I hate cinematics. I hate them. Let's just jump, see if they show gameplay. I know they did. I checked this earlier. We can get to it. It's gonna be the here we go. Like the last few seconds, they finally show some gameplay. Oh man, they give us like 20 seconds of gameplay. Look at this though. The thing that excites me is like obviously this is not a console level title, but it's a Game Boy style title. It's a 3DS style title. It's like a perfect pull it out of your pocket, play for 5-10 minutes, like go back about your day, right? You're waiting in line at the doctor's office, you're doing whatever. Like these kind of titles, I enjoy them, really like them. But excited to see Netflix pushing more and more into this sort of thing. And this game is coming from that game right there is coming from Super Evil Megacore, which is like a great title for a game developer, especially a mobile game developer, I think. Or they had made TMNT Splinter Fate, and now they're working on a deal with Netflix to do these next games. So we're starting to see some pretty interesting spaces over here with Apple Arcade, with Netflix. Interested to see what Amazon does, and very interested to see the push into mobile that both PlayStation and Xbox try to make. We know PlayStation's bought mobile developers. We know Xbox aspires to. They also already have Alpha Dog through the ZeniMax acquisition, who put out Mighty Doom, which was a great little smaller mini title that was quite enjoyable. So yeah, that's something I'm excited for. I might be one of the few that really gets into mobile gaming, but there it is. Beyond that, let's kind of touch on some quicker stories here. Final Fantasy 16 banned in one country, Saudi Arabia. It joins titles like God of War and GTA, amongst others, being banned for like, sexualization or drug use or alcohol or violence. Not sure exactly what Final Fantasy 16 got banned for. It does seem to come down to the fact that they just didn't want to make any adjustments. I'm assuming, look, this game got a mature rating. It's not out yet. We don't know what's in it, but it got a mature. So I'm assuming there's going to be some violence. I wouldn't be surprised if there's maybe some sexualization or heavy references to like alcohol or drugs. It seems like they're going for kind of a more adult story. And I would assume that whatever issues Saudi Arabia had with it were likely pretty integral to the game, and they'd have to do some major changes. So Saudi Arabia said the game's publisher, Square Enix, was unwilling. Their unwillingness to make necessary changes led to the boycott. But look, what are you going to do? They've banned plenty of games that go on to be great successes. I think that they'll be all right. Moving on from there, From Software announced the release date for Armored Core 6: Fires of Rubicon. It'll be coming out August 25th, 2023. So that means August 25th, we've got Armored Core from FromSoft. You know, the people who just are coming off of Elden Ring. Then you go to September 6th, we've got Starfield. So what's right in the middle of those two? Sea of Stars, August 29th. Sabotage. I know you're not watching this, but get out of there. Get out of the way. You're the main part of a dangerous sandwich. Sea of Stars is a phenomenal looking title. I'm super excited for it. It was just in a video I made a week or two ago on the channel. And I'm so worried now that Sea of Stars is going to get swallowed up because you got a FromSoft title and a Bethesda title on either side of that thing. And I can't think of two things in that window that are going to be, those are going to be media, those are just going to be, those are attention whore games. They are going to suck up so much attention that I really think I'm worried now for Sea of Stars. I fear for them. Those games are going to suck up all the oxygen on either side of that release. So just a quick maybe think about moving. Obviously they probably won't, but just a little fear on my end. All right, a few quick numbers before we get into the big story. Ghostwire Tokyo announced 4 million players have played the game across all platforms. Obviously, it initially released on PS5 exclusive before coming to Xbox and PC. That's a great number for them. Again, from Tango Gameworks, now under Xbox, and their recently released title, Hi-Fi Rush, was also well received. So really cool to see this studio kind of up and coming. Excited to see where they go next. Minecraft Legends has just launched last month, and 3 million players have already hopped in, which is huge for them in such a short span. So pretty good numbers there. And then lastly, Hogwarts Legacy has topped $15 million in sales, grossed over, or 15 million in sales, not dollars, 15 million sales of the game, and grossed over $1 billion. So I think Warner Brothers is going to be pretty happy with Hogwarts Legacy. I think they did, in the first 2 weeks, they did like 12 million copies. So it looks like they've pushed about 3 million more copies out. Obviously, with games, the big push is always right in the beginning. But yeah, crossing that, hitting $1 billion in their first less than a year, and they hit $1 billion. That's pretty good. I'm sure we will be seeing more Harry Potter games from WB Games with that in mind. I know they had said they're probably not going to be working on any DLC, but you almost kind of have to imagine like something has got to be coming. Something has got to be coming for them with those kind of numbers, but I don't know. We'll see. Lastly, just a quick note. Marvel's Spider-Man, the original, is finally available to pick up on PS5 without having to go through Miles Morales. Previously, the only way to get the PS5 edition of Spider-Man, you could buy the PS4 version separately, but if you wanted that upgraded version, you needed the ultimate version of Miles Morales. They've done away with that now. You can outright purchase the upgrade version, or if you already own the PS4 version, it's a $10 upgrade to get the PS5 version, whether that's physical or disc. I was in a situation where I was gifted Miles Morales and didn't have the ultimate, so I was unable to access the PS5 version of Spider-Man. I was pretty grumbly McGrumbleson about it, but excited that that's available. I'm hoping to maybe find some time to jump in to that, just kind of refresh myself a little bit before Spider-Man 2 launches sometime in September, I believe there's no official date, but that's sort of the rumor. So let's see. That's kind of all the little short news and the smaller stuff. It looks like it's time to get into the big story, which is Redfall and Phil Spencer's subsequent interview. So yeah, if you're watching this, you likely know Redfall, a game from Arcane Austin, an Xbox studio, part of the ZeniMax Bethesda acquisition. They launched Redfall, and leading up to the release, there was some grumbling. They'd had a terrible showing on IGN where people kind of went after, like, whoever was playing the game, as this had to be bad gameplay. It was announced that it was only going to be 30 FPS on console, which for a first-person shooter, 60 FPS really is becoming kind of the norm. And when games like Call of Duty have been doing 60 FPS for like a decade now or something, it just seems like it should be standard and something you really got to go with for it to feel comfortable. But all those things were kind of strikes against it. The game actually launched though, and I mean, I don't think anyone was expecting it to end up with IGN gave it a 4. I think it's sitting at a 60 on OpenCritic, a 58 on Metacritic. I saw on OpenCritic only 15% of critics recommend. I mean, the game is getting torn apart. I haven't played it yet. I haven't checked it out. Honestly, the reviewers I trust sort of scared me away. And I talked about previously on this channel. It was a game already because of all the kind of ifs and maybes and just the look of it. With it being so close to Zelda's release, I wasn't gonna mess with it. But yeah, glad I made that choice because even with this being on Game Pass, it doesn't seem like it'd be worth the 100 gig or 80 gig download. I think I saw that it was pretty large. A lot of technical issues, a lot of bugs with the game. But I think the big thing, the big issue was it just seems like a poorly designed game almost. AI was very bad. Shooting looked a little rough. And it's not just me saying, oh, this was like a poorly designed game. The craziest thing was that we're going to talk about in a minute. I almost want to jump right into it. But look, Redfall was a terrible, terrible launch. Everybody was bashing it. People have already been it's already been like a bad news cycle for Xbox with like the CMA block on the ABK deal. And just, it seems like it's been, 2022, they didn't launch a fucking game. I mean, okay, they launched like Pentiment and Grounded came out of early access, but those were small teams at Obsidian. What were all the other studios doing? Right? They weren't putting anything out. And so now we're in 2023 and like the expectations are pretty high. They had that developer direct. Hi-Fi Rush dropped, and Hi-Fi Rush was a fantastic game. Honestly, Hi-Fi Rush is like so far in the running for like game of the year for me. What a phenomenal little title. But it's a game that retails at 30, shadow dropped, is not doing the waves. Xbox is in sore need of some of these big AAA first-party games. Or are they? Right? Because I think that's one thing in this interview you're going to see. That question sort of comes up, and it's not answered the way you think it might be. But yeah, let's jump into this real fast. I want to go to... see if I can find where I need to be. Oh, we're about to find... You know what? You guys are coming with me on a journey because I don't even know if I'm able to share sound from the... Hang on. Let's see if this all works. All right, I want to jump over to this interview with Kind of Funny. But here we go. Okay, so Phil Spencer goes to this interview, and here's the first thing to talk about. This is the CEO of Microsoft Gaming, head of Xbox, all that. This is not a... That's a great picture of him right there. And like the host looks so ticked. He does this interview on Kind of Funny Xcast. And I'm not a regular watcher of Kind of Funny Xcast or Kind of Funny in general, but I got to say these hosts do a phenomenal job in this interview. They ask some great questions, and they got a lot out of Phil Spencer. And Phil Spencer, he seems like a guy on edge. Like, he really seems tense in this interview. Like, he makes jokes about being overpaid. He makes jokes about maybe being replaced, and they fall flat. Like, nobody laughs or smiles. They're almost like throwaway comments as he's talking. I'm not going to show you this whole interview because I don't want to get, I'm not going to show you. It's like a 40-minute interview. But I'll add the link once this is uploaded if you want to go check out the full interview. I think it's 30, 40 minutes. You can skip around. But it's a great interview. It really is, from the head of Xbox. I want to touch on some things that he says, and I also want to go over... at the end, I want to talk about the last thing he says because it has been clipped all over the internet, and I ended up watching more than I normally do, looking for, because people keep taking this final question of his and just like running rampant with it, and it's like in my opinion, it's a gross mischaracterization of what he said. It's very clickbaity, it's very console war, and it's not what he said, it's not what he meant. So I do want to get into that, but I do want to talk about some other things, because this is like, there's a wealth of information we got, because you have I think like kind of a very tense, down bad head of Xbox giving a very honest interview. Like the PR mask in a lot of ways is off, in a lot of other ways it's still on. But I want to jump over to, so he says, oh, I got it right there. Okay, so check this out. He starts this off. He gets asked by the host Snowbike Mike. He gets asked, hey, what happened with Redfall? Like, Redfall launched and it's terrible. What happened? This is the CEO of Xbox. Redfall is his new product that just launched. This is what he says. Oh no, there's no sound. I don't know. Oh no. Okay, hang on. Bear with me. Let's see if we can do this. We're working together, y'all. Wait, is there sound? Okay, hey, you know what? Cut the music. Let's see if we got sound here.
Just to kind of watch the community lose confidence, be disappointed. I'm disappointed.
I can't hear it, but
I'm upset with myself. I kind of revisit our process. You know, I think back to the announcement of 60 frames per second, and then we weren't shipping 60 frames per second. That was kind of our...
Guys, I did not do my homework on how to get this set up technically. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to switch headphones so that I know what we're doing. Now, where were we?
Punch in the chin, rightfully, a couple weeks ago, and then seeing the game come out, and the critical response was not what we wanted, and it's disappointing. And so, kind of pick myself up. What can we learn? How can we get better?
Okay, I'm just gonna stop it right there. This is his product. It's the week it launched, and he's like pretty disappointed in the game. I'm upset with myself. Like, he threw this game under the bus. I mean, damn near throws the studio under the bus. He does go on to clarify, like, he loves Austin Arcane. They've made a lot of great games. He's fully supportive of them. He knows they're going to do great in the future. But I just found this very surprising. I can't think of a time I've ever seen a studio head really come out and just, oh, this game, you're right. Like, they're like, hey, this, you know, you hear people say, like, games crash all the time, crash and burn, and like, this game sucks. But to hear the head of Xbox come out and be like, you're totally right, this game sucks, very surprising to me. Very, very surprising. Did not expect to see that. But like I said, this guy is seeming a little bit down bad, okay? He goes on to say a lot of other things. I'm not going to kind of jump to each one, but he talks about how a delay would not have helped the game. He doubles down on giving studios creative freedom, but he does say that, like, you know, I think holding this game for 3 months, that really wouldn't have fixed anything. He, you know, talks about, like, it's just, we didn't meet our creative design vision with the game. He even apologizes for, like, misleading people with the advertising. One of the big things was, like, on IGN, and at the they had a creator event where they flew in a bunch of content creators and YouTubers and shit like that, and they showed them all the game running at 60 FPS, and people got to play it on PC at 60 FPS. Even though they knew it would be 30 FPS. And he kind of cops to that in the interview and says, hey, that's on us. But I mean, like, that's a wild, very bold, very, you know, kudos to him for this this apology and being this frank, but very surprising to see that. One thing I could not stop laughing at in this video, I don't know if I can find it in here, but he talks about how he knows there were technical issues. He knows there are bugs, but he does bring up this weird statistic where he's like, but, you know, the crash rate for the game is in the normal bounds for, like, most game launches. So he's like, yeah, the game doesn't crash more than other games, which it's just, that's how bad this game is that he's bragging about, like, oh, it doesn't crash more than other games, which I thought was awesome. He talks about how the mock reviews were off by double digits. So, you know, these studios, before they release these kind of big games, they will bring in mock reviewers, either former game reviewers or current game reviewers that they're paying on the side, to sort of secretly review the game for them, right? Maybe like a build prior to what they're going to get. And these reviewers are meant to be more negative than usual, right? The idea is to like find us any problems we might be able to use to make the game better, give us an idea where the game's going to land. Let's get an idea of how this is going to review. And obviously, in that point, you're looking for like a worst case scenario. So for this game to have gotten double digits better than what he was expecting, something's weird with their process. It just seems like maybe there's too many yes men or something. I don't see how reviewers couldn't have found what, universally like all the reviewers found when it actually hit the wild. So those are some interesting things he kind of admits, but he also he does bring up the showcases coming in June. We're getting an Xbox showcase and then a more involved Starfield Direct on the same day, June 11th, I believe, June 11th or 12th. But he says, hey, I don't want to talk up the showcase too much because I understand that like at this point, putting a controller in people's hands is about the only thing people are gonna believe, right? Like Xbox continues to say games are coming, and then they keep falling on their face, not delivering games. So I think that was he's on the money there, but it's like how much credit can you give him, right? Because it's like when someone's like, hey, I know you're not gonna believe me until it actually comes true because I've cried wolf too many times, and it's like, yeah, yes. I don't want to congratulate you for saying that, but it's like it is the honest thing. Like at this point, we just need to see good games. He says they are getting closer to putting out a game a quarter. He says he can see that in the pipeline now. Again, we'll see. But if that's true, that's exciting, right? Xbox has long had an ambition to have like a big release basically every quarter of the year. So that'd be 4 big releases each year, and then I'd assume they'd pepper that in with smaller titles and their third-party deals and indies they get for Game Pass. But yeah, let's hope that comes true soon. Another interesting thing I thought he touched on was that Hi-Fi Rush has gotten all the kind of accolades and the credit, and he says, it is a great game. We're very happy with it. But they also released Age of Empires 2 onto console and sort of re-released a definitive edition. And he makes the point that Age of Empires 2, because it's remaster of a much older game, it's not really getting much love by like the media, or people aren't really talking about it. But actually, more people are playing that game than playing played Hi-Fi Rush. Interesting stat that kind of shows you sometimes the attention of games media or the conversation around gaming doesn't always line up with popularity. Though I do think in this kind of an interview where he's basically like apologizing for the state of Xbox, let's not talk about a remaster of like a super old PC game maybe. But yeah, so Redfall versus Starfield, Xbox hands-on. He does talk about Redfall was largely left on their own, or Arcane Austin was largely left on their own to do what they wanted with Redfall. He says it was in a much further state of development than titles like, say, Starfield. And he does differentiate very clearly. He makes sure to say Starfield has gotten more love from the internal Xbox team. That he calls it the ATG, the Advanced Technology Group, was sent out to Starfield, and they have been working to for a while to help make Starfield the best it can be on Xbox. He talks about how they've reached out to help from some of their other studios, the Coalition and Rare, the teams behind Gears of War and Sea of Thieves. Some people from those teams are now helping for a 60 FPS plan for Redfall, but he does mention that should have been in place like last fall. They were going to have any shot at hitting it at launch. So that's obviously, I'm guessing, at least 3 months out before they're going to be able to roll with that. He's asked by the host, Snow Like Mike here, asks him, will we know if Starfield's going to be 30 or 60 FPS? And Phil Spencer, before launch, and Phil Spencer does say yes, So my money's on 30 for that answer. I'm glad we're getting an answer, but I think it's going to be 30. I don't really see a game like Starfield launching at 60. If you go back to Todd Howard's interview on Lex Friedman's podcast from a couple months ago, he mentions most of our games launch at 30. We've always been comfortable with 30. We think it's a good lane for us. And I don't think it's as concerning as with Redfall. With Redfall being a first-person shooter, you sort of have that expectation of 60. I think an RPG like Starfield, where there's so much going on and you can play it, third person, or really, even if you play it first person, the gunplay is not always like the thing, right? Like the thing, it'll be all right. I didn't mind playing Skyrim at 30. I think I'll be able to stomach this. I'd prefer 60. I would definitely prefer it, but I think 30 on an RPG like Starfield will probably work a little bit better if you're playing on console. Um, and now let's get into the thing I really wanted to talk about with this. Let me jump to where it is. And I mentioned earlier my kind of big beef with how this is all getting framed is that everyone has been talking about what he's going to say, and I'm going to play most of this and kind of stop and talk through this final answer, because I think this is where a lot of the really explosive stuff that Phil Spencer says comes from. One thing that I thought was like very shocking is I ended up bouncing around to a lot of different people trying to see how people were addressing this, because everybody is very up in arms about it, and they're taking, I think, the clip out of context. I didn't see he's answering a question here, and I didn't see anyone talk about what question he's answering or frame what he's saying in the context of the question he's being asked. So let me just play for you the question that Snowbike Mike, the host of Kind of Funny XCast, asks Phil Spencer.
Okay, that's a great one. Another one, you see a lot of conversation, of course. I want to praise you and the team for really elevating the PC side of this Xbox ecosystem. I think we've seen a lot of great strides in that. But when you see the community talk about the console side of things, do you think you've lost the focus or maybe put too much onto the PC side? Do you think that the console is still getting the console love that it deserves, whether it be the homepage update, achievements, of course, looking forward and using the power of this next gen? Do you think you guys have lost that focus, or is it still there, and can we see more love on that side?
Okay, so before we go into Phil's answer, I just wanted everyone to see like that full question, because no one is talking about that question. And so what did Mike ask Phil Spencer? He asked him, "Hey, great job on doing a lot of PC, having a focus on the Xbox experience on PC." But he's basically asking him, "But is that coming at the expense of consoles? Is Xbox's attention being moved off of consoles and onto PC and onto other things? And can we expect to see more of a focus on console? Can that focus on consoles return?" Right? So he's basically asking him, are the strides Xbox is making on PC and elsewhere coming at the expense of the console? And can we expect to see you refocus on the console? So with that in mind, everything else Phil says after that is answering that question. And damn, look at his face here, man. I'm telling you, this guy was stressed for this. I mean, England told him, no, you can't have Activision Blizzard King. Redfall launched like this. The dude is not sleeping. I'm telling you, man, this is crazy. But listen, this is what he says. This is what he says in response to that. In response to the idea of, are you ignoring consoles to better PCs?
Well, we'll definitely continue to focus on making our console experience as great as it can be. I like the homepage refresh and some stuff. I will say, this might be disruptive as well. We have a different vision. You know, Paris talked about this. It's play the games you want with the people you want, anywhere you want. We want Xbox to be something that people who buy our console can feel like they're a member of. Obviously, who are playing on PC, who are playing on cloud, that they feel like they're full members of our ecosystem. Game Pass players can play on many different devices, and we remain fully committed to that. We're not in the business.
Okay, before we keep going with this, let me jump in there for that. So he's talking about, we want people who wherever they play, we want them to feel like first class members, full members of Xbox, right? So whether you play on PC through the PC Game Pass app, whether you're playing on your $500 or $300 console, or whether you're just playing on your phone with a $15 sub fee, they want you to feel as included, right? As part of the same ecosystem, as much an Xbox player, right? So he's saying, no, our focus is going to be on all these things, right? So when you say like, oh, PC is coming at the expense of console, I do think he's saying like that's not going to stop, right? I think he's saying that's going to continue. That's just, it is what it is. It is what it is. And that's what he's saying right there. So let's just keep going, right?
Of out consoling Sony or out consoling Nintendo member on many different devices, or out consoling Nintendo.
Okay. So he says, we're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. And this is the thing that's like people are freaking out about.
There isn't really a great solution or win for us. And I know that will upset a ton of people.
Oh boy, it upset a lot of people. I love it. I love seeing people like melt down on Twitter and all these great thumbnails. Like, you know, people are like, Phil Spencer should resign. How dare he say this? But here's the thing. They've been saying they're not going to try to out-console Sony or Nintendo for years now. You can find articles as far back as 2019, maybe further, where they talk about we don't see console sales. Console sales aren't going to be how we measure success. Before the launch of these new consoles, they had talked about how they don't see that as the marker of success anymore. It's more about monthly active users. It's more about players in the service. And they talked about how they don't see Sony and Nintendo as the true competitor or as their true competition anymore. They see their competition as things like Netflix and Amazon. So I think that's been stated before, that their focus is not going to be purely on console. And that's what he's saying here. And that's what I think people take a lot of offense to, because there are a lot of, I think, pundits and analysts in this space that they just either don't want to believe Xbox, or they just like cannot detach themselves from the idea of blue versus green versus red, that it's Xbox console versus Sony's console. And that's how we're always going to contextualize every debate. It's how we're going to look at their success. We're going to measure it against the other console manufacturer. And Xbox has been trying to buck that for years now. And I think we're starting to see, we see here as he speaks, a little bit of frustration trying to get across that, like, they see Xbox on PC as just as genuine as Xbox on console. But let's keep going here.
But it's just the truth of the matter is that when you're third place in the console marketplace and the top two players are as strong as they are and have, in certain cases, very, very discrete focus on doing deals and other things that will that kind of make being Xbox hard for us as a team. That's on us, not on anybody else. Our vision is that everybody who's on console has to feel like they have a great experience and they're a first-class citizen. They've invested a ton in our platform. But we are not in a position, and I see it out there. I see commentary that if you just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose.
All right. We started getting into the next point, but this thing also has angered a lot of people, where he says, I see people say, and he says it's not true, if we just make great games on console, that we'll see the console market shift in a dramatic way. People are furious about this comment, but he's right. That is a true statement. All right, because he's not saying Xbox shouldn't make great games. I mean, they're trying to buy Call of Duty, one of the most popular games ever. They bought Bethesda, makers of Doom, Skyrim, Wolfenstein. They're spending billions on it. They have all these games announced. They're attempting to make games, great games. But doing that alone is not enough for them, especially when he says great games on console is not enough to shift the market. And I see people saying, if you make great games on your console, you'll sell a few more consoles. Yeah, but I don't think Xbox measures success by, let's sell a few more consoles. When you see Satya Nadella a few years ago say Xbox is all in on gaming, and we see our space with gaming the way Amazon has shopping, or the way Facebook, now Meta, has social media, they're not trying to sell a few million more consoles. They're trying to... Xbox talks about this all the time. 3 billion gamers. And I feel like that number just goes right over people's heads. They say 3 billion gamers all the time. That's their goal. They want to reach 3 billion gamers. Well, when you look at the console space and you look at how many consoles Nintendo and PlayStation and Xbox sell, if you were to imagine like no overlap there, right? You got 122 million Switches. I think PS4 ended at like 115, 117 million. Xbox is probably sitting somewhere between 50 and 60 million for the last generation. You're looking at maybe 300 million console gamers. So 300 million on the high-end console gamers, that's not 3 billion. And they're never going to get to 3 billion by poaching or trying to poach players from Sony and PlayStation, or I mean Sony and Nintendo. And even if they, they get double dippers, people who have a PlayStation buy an Xbox. I mean, and I believe actually, I think I heard that about 23% of the market. I think the CMA said, and this is obviously like a UK stat, it's the CMA, but I think they said 23% of the market is PlayStation and Xbox owners, of console owners over there. So, I do think a lot of people have multiple consoles, but again, even if they got all the console players, 300 million does not get them to 3 billion. And that's the goal for them. So when he says it's not going to shift the market in a dramatic way, I do believe him. He's not trying to take Xbox from 50 million consoles to 60 or 70 million consoles. The goal is to reach this huge number, and the way that their way of doing that is through PC and xCloud. Now, to be frank, as someone who likes to study this industry and really likes the business side of gaming and wanting to know about it, I find that super interesting that they're going off on this other direction and they're trying to something new, something different, and they have this goal in mind that's very lofty and honestly seems like, how are they possibly going to do this? Especially when you look at the fact that the ABK deal is on the ropes, man, hanging off the cliff. As a consumer that's largely PC console game focused, when I do play something like mobile, it's supplementary. I don't know that I love this. I don't really care how much money Xbox makes or how successful they are. I want to play great games. So I don't care if Xbox reaches 3 billion gamers. I don't. I think it's going to be interesting to watch. As an industry, for industry interest, right, in the business, it'll be interesting to see the steps they take to get there and what that ends up looking like. But I don't care. I don't get any money from it. Like, it doesn't enrich me. If Xbox shifts more and more towards mobile, and that gets them more and more gamers, and they make more money, and I don't care. Like, I care about Gears 6. I hope the new Fable is good. I'm excited for Forza Motorsport. Like, that's what I care about. But I'm not going to sit here and act like what Phil Spencer's saying is some wild, crazy thing or they've given up. He's answering the question, are you going to refocus on consoles? And he's like, no, because for them, consoles is not enough. Selling 10, 20 million more consoles, yes, that would look good on their financials, but Microsoft is a large company that has long-term goals. They're not looking at they're not focused on like mid-gen or even the end of this gen as their goal. They have 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plans of like, where do we end up? What does gaming look like? What does content consumption look like? When you really got to think when you have someone like Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, like I said, framing it as like, we want to be for gaming what Amazon is for like e-commerce, or what like Meta has been for like social media. They want to be this big player that has, the most MAUs, the most services. Like, software and services is their focus. And so I think that's sort of this getting hammered home to a lot of people who want them to be console focused. But let me back up a couple seconds because I started to jump in on the next point he makes. So here we go.
You're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One generation, where everybody built their digital library of games. So when you go and you're building on Xbox, we want our Xbox community to feel awesome. But this idea that if we just focused more on great games on our console, that somehow we're going to win the console race, I think doesn't really lay into the reality of most people. Like 90% of the people.
This is a phenomenal point that he makes here. The digital libraries really did get built over the last cycle. The Switch came to the cycle late. It was obviously in the middle of the PS4 and Xbox One gen. But I think it hit it at the right time, and Nintendo can be an outlier in certain ways. But for those three systems in particular, people built up digital libraries in a big way. Obviously on Steam, that had already been occurring. But for PlayStation and Xbox, the jump from 360 to 1 and the jump from 3 to 4, digital games are like 80% of sales now. Even though physical still has a place in the industry, and with consumers, 80% of sales are digital. Like, the people have spoken. We're going digital, baby. And when you consider, I consider where my library is of games, and like, yeah, I think some people are entrenched, especially more casual players are very entrenched. If all your copies of FIFA and all your copies of Call of Duty are on PlayStation, you're not switching just because a game like Starfield is popular. If all your library is on Xbox, God of War is not enough to make you really switch over, especially when you consider even if Xbox is making these good games, and people aren't going to switch because PlayStation and Nintendo are also not going to stop making good games. These studios are going to, their studios are like known heavy hitters, right? Like that's why I have a Nintendo and a PlayStation and an Xbox is to play the different games, right? But for most consumers, they're happy with just one. Most people are going to have one. That's where all their stuff is. They're very invested. They have a library of titles and they know more are coming. So to abandon that ecosystem, I don't see that happening. And I've said before on here, I personally believe more and more casual consumers are going to start to shift onto cloud gaming, where it's going to be an app on their smart TVs. Not next year, maybe not even at the end of this console cycle. I do think it's very likely we see like a PS6 and an Xbox Series Ultra, whatever they name it, right? Like we see that. But I do think long term, more and more cloud is going to be more prevalent. When I look at what like NVIDIA GeForce can do, what Amazon, the quality of Amazon Luna, the quality of Xbox's xCloud, that's only going to get better, I think. And I don't think it'll ever fully replace it. But I also think you've got something eating at consoles from the other side, and that's these handheld gaming devices. You look at the Steam Deck and you look at the Asus ROG Ally. I know right now it's priced at $699, and that's expensive, but that price is going to come down. The output it can do is going to go up. That thing is going to get much closer. These handheld devices are going to get much closer to the $500 mark, and they're going to give you access. They're going to be PCs. You're going to have access to multiple game shops. And when you look at PlayStation putting games on PC, Xbox puts all their games on PC day one. You look at what's available on Steam. If they can get one of those handhelds into that $500 price range and they start selling a dock that hooks up to people's TVs, that's going to eat into consoles as well. Gaming laptops that can be hooked up to TVs, that's going to eat into consoles as those things get cheaper and cheaper. And then cloud on the other end of it. So I do think the console market over time is gonna shrink as PCs get more affordable and enthusiasts move in that direction, and as cloud takes over for casual. So I think he has a point long term with some of that. But let's keep going.
Every year who walk into a retailer to buy a console are already a member of one of the three ecosystems, and their digital library is there. This is the first generation where the big games that they're playing were games that were available last gen. When you think about Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft, like the continuity from generation to generation is so strong. I see a lot of pundits out there that kind of want to go back to the time where we all had cartridges and discs, and every new generation was a clean slate, and you could switch the whole console share. That's just not the world that we are in today.
It's kind of what I said. It's almost like I watched this already.
There is no world where Starfield's an 11 out of 10 and people start selling their PS5s. That's not going to happen. So what we have to...
And there's that quote. If Starfield's an 11 out of 10, people aren't going to start selling their PS5. And I see people say, no, that's not the goal. The goal is that they also buy an Xbox. But I don't think that's something Microsoft wants. That's not really... they make their money off ecosystem purchases. You buying DLC, you buying other games on their ecosystem. If a PlayStation owner buys an Xbox just for a few Xbox exclusives, it severely limits the income and the value of that for Microsoft. Again, I think this ties into why he's saying there needs to be a focus on more than just console for Xbox to achieve their vision. As a consumer, I don't care. As someone who analyzes games industry and really kind of thinks heavily about it more than most people, I find that super interesting
to do. And we have this unique vision because we see what creators want to do. Creators want to build games that can meet players on any screen. People play with their friends regardless of what other screen they're on. And the console is the core of the Xbox brand. There's no doubt. So like we will stay focused on making sure that console experience is awesome. But I know some people want to hold us up of just being a better green version of what the blue guys do. And I'm just going to say, like, there's not a win for Xbox in staying in the wake of somebody else. We have to go off and do our own thing with Game Pass, with the stuff we do with xCloud, and the way we build our games. Sorry, I was a little long-winded.
No,
They have to go off and do their own things with xCloud and all that. And that's kind of the whole point of what he was saying, what he was answering. And I feel like a lot of pundits that I normally follow or check into from time to time, they just don't want to hear it. I feel like people are really fighting that concept and that idea. And yeah, I think it's pretty silly, man. I really do. But what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? That's what he said. It's been freaking people out from the get-go. But I think he's right. As far as what Xbox's vision is, I think he's right. How do I feel about it as a consumer? I don't care how much money any of these companies make. I care about great games, and they're going to have to deliver or they're not. But to act like it's this new thing that Xbox isn't going to focus on consoles, and to act like what he's saying is great games don't matter, none of that's true. It's been long understood that Xbox is not solely focused on consoles. Make of that what you will. And obviously, they want to put out great games at Xbox because obviously they want you to subscribe to Game Pass. That's why they're all there day one. You know, they know you got to have games people want to play, right? I mean, it's like Netflix doesn't not care about putting out great shows because they're on a subscription service. I mean, that's why you get things like Stranger Things and the like, and House of Cards. They know they need great content. They also know they need a lot of content, and they also know they need to be in as many places as they can be. It's why Netflix is not just on your laptop or your TV. It's also on your phone, right? And so that's really Xbox's goal, for better or for worse. Like, you don't have to be into that or think that's the best way for gaming to go forward. I'm not sure that I'm 100% in agreement with that vision. Like I said, like I definitely think there's a very real future where Xbox gets more and more into mobile, because there is a lot of money in mobile gaming. And there's a future where Xbox focuses more and more on that. And I'm not stoked for that, but luckily I have a Nintendo, I have a PlayStation, I've got a PC, in addition to the Xbox, so I'll be all right. But I have might be the new record for the new longest video. Thanks for hanging in there, checking this out if you're watching at this point. Otherwise, I'll catch you next week.